Welcome back to the deep dive. You've brought us an extraordinary stack of source material today. I mean, it looks like a canonical roadmap, meticulously detailed, charting some of the most advanced stages of, well, human psychological development.
It really is. It's the ultimate itinerary, you could say.
And this isn't just about, feeling a bit calmer. It's about achieving a kind of ultimate permanent stability.
Exactly. We are charting the Buddha's path that was designed specifically for the complete destruction of defilements. It's a process known in the Pāli tradition as āsavakkhaya.
Āsavakkhaya.
Right. And what makes this deep talk so unique, I think, is that it forces us to follow this path right from the beginning, from foundational moral purity through this really intense analytic insight, and then all the way up through the entire 9-stage structure of meditative absorption, the jhanas.
So our mission today is to take this ancient map and really transform it into immediately actionable knowledge for you, the listener. And we're not skipping the hard parts. It looks like we need to dissect 3 really crucial areas.
Yes, 3 main pillars.
First, there's this non-negotiable analytical framework. How the components of the self, these 5 aggregates, they have to be viewed through 11 very specific and frankly often jarring lenses.
Yes, that's foundational.
Second, the really practical how-to. How do you actually enter, stabilize, and then advance through each of these 9 jhanas?
Mechanics of it.
Exactly. And third, really understanding the destination, this sublime state, the deathless element, that's defined by the phrase, etai santa eta pantai.
This is peaceful, this is sublime.
So just to set the terrain for everyone, we have to start with that core concept, right, jhana?
We have to. The term itself, it's rooted in Jha, and it has this fascinating double meaning. It means both to absorb and to burn.
So it's not a passive state.
Not at all. That tells us immediately that this is not some kind of recreational trance state. It's a deep, focused absorption whose entire purpose is to burn up the defilements, the asavas.
So concentration is just the fuel, but the fire is. It's the purpose that fuels the fire. And that purpose is āsavakkhaya.
Precisely. Āsavakkhaya is the destruction of the taints. These are the outflowing intoxicants of sense desire, the craving for existence, ignorance. The root word is ekha, which means to wear away or to destroy.
So you're literally wearing them down.
You are. And the canonical sources are just so explicit about this. This whole 9-stage map, it's not just about generating these beautiful, peaceful states of mind. It's declared as the direct mechanism for achieving this destruction, but, and this is the key, provided one vital ingredient is applied at every single step.
And that's profound insight, Panya.
That's it, Panya.
Okay, let's unpack this then. If insight is the critical ingredient, we have to start with the foundational recipe. You've highlighted some material that suggests, and this sounds a little counterintuitive, that before we even get to the bliss of the first absorption, there's this intense analytical work that has to stabilize the mind.
Right.
It's like we're asked to analyze our experience to death before we can find any rest.
That's the paradox, isn't it? And it's the heart of section 1, the foundation of insight. You see, the great danger of these incredibly deep meditative states is a kind of spiritual materialism.
You mean getting attached to the state itself?
Exactly. The attachment to the high, to the stillness, or the profound peace. And the only way, according to these texts, to inoculate the mind against that attachment is by thoroughly, rigorously scrutinizing the components of the experience itself.
So we scrutinize the 5 aggregates, and for listeners who might need a quick refresher, these are basically the components that make up everything we perceive as I or me.
That's right. They're the fundamental building blocks of any conditioned experience. The meditator has to examine, one by one, first, form or rupagata. That's the physical body and all the external sensory objects.
Okay, so the physical side of things.
Feeling, vedanagata. This is just the hedonic tone.
Yeah.
Is it pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral?
The raw feeling.
The raw feeling. Third is perception, sanyagata. This is the function of recognition or labeling, like that is blue or this feeling is happiness.
So the mental tag we put on things?
Precisely. Fourth, and this one is a bit more subtle, is formations, sakkaragata. These are the volitional activities, the mental impulse that constructs our experience and leads to action, karma, essentially.
The engine of it all.
It is. And finally, consciousness, viññāgata. This is the bare awareness that just registers the presence of the other 4.
And these 5 categories, they They arise and pass away, even in the most refined meditative states. So if we hold on to any of them as permanent or desirable or as some kind of self, we're stuck.
You're stuck.
And this is where that critical lens comes in. The 11 contemplations. We need to go through these meticulously because it sounds like they are the absolute core of the liberating insight.
Absolutely. This list is the psychological scalpel. It's what's required to carve out attachment at the root. The monk has to view these aggregates, which includes the very body that is sitting there and the mental factors that make up the Jhāna, using these 11 specific perspectives.
Let's start with the two most foundational ones, the ones that are most widely discussed.
Right. The meditator first contemplates the aggregates as, number 1, aniccato, which means impermanent, and number 2, dukkhato, suffering.
Okay, impermanence and suffering.
Impermanence is that constant flux. Nothing ever stays put. And if something is fundamentally impermanent, then clinging to it, even the most profound bliss of deep meditation, is guaranteed to lead to suffering. And dukkha here isn't just, overt pain. It's the fundamental unsatisfactoriness of anything that's conditioned.
It's built into the system.
It's built into the system. Now, this is where the sources take a really deep, almost jarring turn into some very specific physical and medical metaphors. This is what we can call the physical burden.
Right, and this is what I found so striking. Why this sudden shift to the language of disease when the person is supposed to be entering a state of, ultimate physical peace?
It's completely deliberate. The whole purpose is to prevent attachment to the physical comfort that deep concentration often brings. The body, no matter how comfortable it feels in that moment, is still fundamentally flawed. So the monk views the aggregates as, number 3, rogato.
As disease.
As disease. This refers to the aggregates as a kind of ongoing illness, a chronic condition of vulnerability and instability. Existence itself is compromised.
Wow.
Then number 4, getato. This means a tumor or a boil.
The tumor.
Yes, it's an image of something foreign and malignant growing within the system. It suggests an inherent toxicity, a part of our compounded state that is actively causing harm or, might require a painful removal.
So it's not just sick, it's cancerous.
In a metaphorical sense, yes. And then number 5, salato, which means a dart or an arrow. This emphasizes sudden, piercing injury. So even if the body seems perfectly healthy and still, it's poised to be wounded at any moment. It points to the acute, unavoidable pain that's just inherent in being an entity subject to physical processes.
So it's not just a general feeling of malaise. It's like you're performing a diagnostic on the inherent structural flaws of compounded existence. Even if your body is perfectly motionless in the first jhana, you're training yourself to see it as a toxic, time-bound structure that's already been wounded by a dart.
That reframing is absolutely essential. You are actively, consciously destabilizing the mind's tendency to take refuge in the body's temporary stillness.
And that's followed by what you've called the relational burden, which seems to shift the focus outward and really question our sense of ownership.
It does. The relational burden includes viewing the aggregates as, number 6, agato, a calamity.
A calamity.
And 7, a bahato, an affliction.
So not just a flaw, but an active affliction.
An active affliction. And then, crucially, number 8, parato.
Alien.
Alien. Viewing the aggregates as alien is the direct assault on the whole concept of self-possession. The mind must recognize that even the deepest feelings of bliss, peace, or clarity that arise in meditation are not mine.
They don't belong to you.
They don't. They are merely phenomena belonging to a compounded structure. They are, in a sense, external to any true unconditioned reality.
I find Parato so incredibly striking. It requires such a radical level of detachment. I mean, to be in a state of overwhelming rapture, the absolute pinnacle of meditative joy, and yet have the presence of mind to categorize it mentally as belonging to an alien structure.
But that's the very mechanism.
That prevents you from taking ownership of your spiritual progress.
Exactly. If you don't own it, you can't grieve when it passes. The experience is not you. It is simply a temporary event passing through. And this all leads us to the ultimate non-negotiable truth, what we can call the ultimate flaw trio.
Okay, the final 3.
Which are, number 9, palakato, disintegrating.
So falling apart.
Falling apart right now, in real time. Even the strongest mental formations are dissolving as we speak. Then, number 10, sunnyato, empty.
Empty.
And 11, anattato, not self.
Okay, let's focus on the distinction between empty and not self, because that can be tricky.
It can. Sunnyato, empty, means the aggregates are empty of any inherent permanent self-essence. They are nothing more than a collection of causes and conditions. There's no thing in there.
So even the experience of, say, pure unified consciousness in a high jhana, that consciousness itself is sunyanato. It's empty of anything that you could label consciousness with a capital C or some kind of stable underlying substrate.
Exactly right. It lacks any inherent independent existence. And because it lacks that inherent existence, sunyanato, it leads you inevitably to the final conclusion that it is anattato, not self. The meditator concludes, these flawed, impermanent, diseased, alien, empty components cannot possibly be me or mine. They are just functional processes.
This pre-work is. It's incredibly intense. It sounds like a meditator is actively cultivating a deep sense of disenchantment, even with what seems like profound spiritual achievement. But I have to ask this. For the listener who is engaging in a deep concentration practice, how is it even possible to maintain this kind of cold, hard analysis, this paññā in the face of overwhelming pīti, rapture?
Right.
Doesn't the analysis just immediately pull you out of the stillness you've worked so hard to achieve?
That is the essential dynamic tension that defines the entire liberating path. It's a fantastic question. The depth of concentration, samadhi, it creates the stability, the stillness, and the raw clarity. It's like creating a perfectly still surface on a lake.
Okay.
But the depth of insight, paññā, immediately applies the truth to that stability. It sees the reflections on the water for what they are. And it is not a cold analysis in the sense of, intellectualizing. It's direct experiential seeing.
So it's not about reciting this list while you're meditating. It's about training the mind to recognize the quality of impermanence as it's actually manifesting in the bliss itself.
Yes, that's it, precisely. When the pīti arises, that wave of physical thrill, the trained mind sees that thrill as rising and falling. It sees it as agitated. It even sees it as an abhāto, an affliction, because it's ultimately conditional. So it becomes a simultaneous apprehension. Deep stillness plus radical non-clinging. This insight is what prevents attachment, and it ensures that the jhana leads, if not to instant liberation, then at least to the highest form of rebirth.
Which brings us to the path itself. That sets the perfect stage for section 2. The path to deep absorption, the rupa jhanas, the form jhanas 1 through 4. Let's dive into the detailed practical steps for actually entering these states.
Okay. The sources, they stress again and again that the jhana states are not achieved through sheer mental force or willpower.
You can't muscle your way in.
You can't. They arise by non-feeding. It's a process of removal. You stop feeding the senses, you stop feeding the mental obstructions, and the stillness just emerges naturally on its own.
And the prerequisites are the foundation of this non-feeding. We start with sila, which is moral purity, basically abstaining from harm. Why is that so essential for concentration?
It's essential because a lack of sila generates kukuka remorse and regret.
Mental static.
It's the worst kind of mental static. Remorse is a form of agitation that makes true stillness impossible. So a mind that is morally pure gains a fundamental stability, the lack of inner conflict. This then has to be coupled with external physical seclusion, literally withdrawing from sensory chaos, and internal restraint of the six senses, or indriya savara.
And this is how you starve the hindrances.
This is how you starve the 5 hindrances, particularly the big one at the start, sense desire, kamacchanda.
So once the ground is prepared, the meditator focuses on a single object. Let's say, the breath. How does the first jhana, the Paṭhama-Jhāna, actually arise?
It arises when those 5 hindrances are fully secluded. They've been starved, and they recede. The defining characteristics of J1 are 2 key mental factors, vitakka and vicāra.
Applied thought and sustained thought. Let's use an analogy to make this really clear for the listener.
Okay, think of the mind as a powerful flashlight in a dark room. Vitakka is the initial, precise placement of that flashlight beam onto a single object, like the sensation of the breath of the nostrils. It's the mental effort to orient the mind.
Okay, so you're aiming the beam.
You're aiming the beam. Vicāra is the sustained holding of that beam on the object, examining it continuously, keeping it steady.
And when this happens, the mind is now described as being born of seclusion, vitakka-vicāra, and it experiences 2 very powerful emotional results. Pīti, which is rapture or thrill, and sukha, which is happiness or deep contentment.
And crucially, as we mentioned before, pīti and sukha are results. They are not methods. You don't try to generate them.
You can't try to be happy.
You can't. They are the physiological and psychological overflow that just happens when the mind is temporarily freed from the incredible drag of sense desire, the kamasava.
And so what does this first stage destroy, or at least suppress?
It temporarily destroys the sense desire taint, the kamasava. The mind is utterly, completely separated from the world of the senses. And if the meditator then immediately applies those 11 contemplations to the pīti and sukha itself, seeing them as alien, as impermanent and final liberation, arahantship, is actually possible right there.
Wow.
At a minimum, that level of stability guarantees non-returner status.
Okay. So moving on to the Duttiya-Jhāna, the second jhana, this is where the whole operation seems to change. We have to shut down the very flashlight, the vitakka and vicāra, that just got us here in the first place.
Yes. The second jhana is defined by the complete subsiding, the vipassana, of the thinking mind. It's a collapse of vitakka and vicāra. And this is critical. If you try to actively suppress your thinking, you just generate tension.
Which pulls you right out of the jhana.
Immediately.
So if there's no deliberate suppression, how on earth does it happen?
The first jhana has to be practiced until it becomes utterly natural, effortless, stable. When the object of meditation is so unified and so clear in the mind's eye, the applied thought, vitakka, just drops away naturally. It's no longer needed. The mind is glued to the object.
And then the sustaining thought follows.
The sustained thought, vicāra, then just fades automatically. It's a process of refinement, not effort. You don't push it away, you allow it to subside.
The resulting stillness it's like that beautiful simile you mentioned. The mind becomes like a motionless flame in a windless room.
That's the image. And new factors arise to replace the thought process. We find sampassana, which is a kind of inner clarity or confidence, and ekadipava, which means unification of mind.
And the rapture and happiness?
The pīti and sukha are still present, but their source is different. They are now born of samadhi, of collectedness itself, not of seclusion from sense input. So this joy is pure, it's more internal, and it's less dependent on that initial mental grappling.
And what taint is being targeted here?
Well, the kamasava, sense desire, is completely absent. But more significantly, bhavasava, the craving for existence, begins to weaken, particularly the attachment to mental formation itself. The meditator has a direct insight. Oh, thinking, even concentrated thinking, is just unnecessary noise.
And that insight sets up the move to the third jhana, the Taṭṭhiya-jhāna, where we have to abandon the very thing that made the first two stages feel so successful, that rapture, pīti. This seems incredibly counterintuitive. Why would you give up that spiritual joy?
Because the meditator, with the clarity of the second jhana, comes to realize that pīti, the thrill, is still a form of agitation. It has an emotional signature. It generates movement in the nervous system. The third jhana is all about viraga, the fading away of that emotional coloring. The mind has to choose deep, quiet happiness, sukha, over the excitement of rapture.
That sounds like a moment of immense psychological maturity. The mind literally stops seeking an emotional reward from the practice.
It is often called the jhana of mature meditators for that very reason. It's characterized by absolute, balanced equanimity, upekkha, and full comprehension, sampajanya. The stability is so profound that the mind can now see the subtle restlessness in pīti, and it naturally just declines to engage with it. Only this deep, quiet contentment remains.
So when the pīti fades, what happens to craving?
Emotional craving just collapses. And this is a significant moment where the subtle bhavatasha, the craving for existence, specifically for existence in a joyful, refined state, it weakens very sharply. If the meditator can successfully maintain those 11 contemplations here, the liberating insight is immensely powerful.
Which brings us to the last of the form jhanas, the fourth, Cathutta-jhāna. This is where we go beyond all hedonic polarity. We abandon the remaining pleasure, the sukha, and all memory of pain.
Yes, the Pāli formula for it is incredibly instructive. It's adukamaskun upekasati parasuti. Meaning a state beyond all pleasure and all pain, beyond all joy and all sorrow. It's perfect neutrality.
But what is that experience actually like? If all feeling positive and negative is gone, isn't there a danger of it just being blankness? Or dullness?
Not at all, and that's the key. The definition includes parasuti, the total purification of mindfulness by equanimity. So it is perfect alertness, razor-sharp clarity, and total stillness. The mind is so purified that it no longer reacts to pleasure or non-pleasure. It is fully alert, but completely, utterly unmoved. The sources are clear that all emotional identity collapses here.
So just to recap the progression, we've moved from getting rid of sense desire in J1 to getting rid of thinking in J2, getting rid of the emotional thrill in J3, and now, finally, getting rid of the most subtle attachment, the attachment to happiness itself in J4.
That is the exact progression. This perfectly neutral, alert, and still state is the ultimate boundary of emotional and physical experience within this realm of form. It's the perfect launch pad. If insight strikes here, instant arahantship is possible, because the mind has literally nothing left to cling to. It is the absolute gateway to the formless states and potentially to Nibbāna itself.
That transition from seeing every single element of your conditioned self as a disease and a dart to achieving the state of purified, unmoving stillness is the perfect setup for our next section. Section 3, the sublime destination, which is defined by that incredible phrase, atasantayatapata.
Yes. The entire purpose of applying those 11 contemplations was to actively deconstruct the perceived value of conditioned reality, even the peak performance of the conditioned mind, which is what the jhanas are. Once that deconstruction is complete, the mind has no other option. It has nowhere else to go but to incline toward the asakkhaya, the deathless element.
And the phrase etasantayatapata, this is peaceful, this is sublime, is essentially the signpost pointing to Nibbāna. How do the source materials elaborate on this destination?
It's fascinating. It defines Nibbāna not by what it is, but by what has ceased. Provides a list of 6 components, and this shows the complete ending of all defilements, including that fundamental misconception of a self.
Let's break down those 6 definitions, because they sound crucial for understanding what the final goal of this whole map actually is.
They are. First is the stilling of all formations, or sabbasakarasamato.
Yeah.
This is the cessation of all conditioned things, especially the mental formations, the sakkharas, which are the volitional impulses that create karma and keep the whole cycle of suffering going.
So the engine stops.
The engine stops. Second, the relinquishing of all acquisitions, sabupahikvinasago, all the things the mind has grasped or clung to or taken refuge in, even the stillness of the highest jhanas, are entirely abandoned, let go of.
Okay.
Third, the destruction of craving, tanchayo, the absolute root cause of all suffering and rebirth, is completely, utterly eliminated.
The root is pulled out.
Pulled out. Fourth, dispassion, virago. This is not just non-attachment, but the complete absence of any emotional coloring or reactive engagement with the world. Fifth, cessation, Nirodha, the absolute final stopping of the cycle of suffering, of rising and falling.
And 6.
6 is simply Nibbāna, the ultimate term for this unconditioned state.
It's the ultimate antidote to the problem that was identified in the 11 contemplations. If the 5 aggregates are fundamentally flawed because they're conditioned, impermanent, and painful, then the answer has to be the unconditioned, the place where all formation and acquisition has been finally stilled.
Precisely. And this addresses that critical element you asked about, the ending of defilements, including the sense of self. By achieving the cessation of formations and relinquishing all acquisitions, there is simply nothing left to identify as a self. The very notion of I am or I exist in any conditioned way just collapses because the conditions that support it have stopped.
So if the jhanas are themselves just a conditioned state of means, not the end, how exactly do they facilitate this final unconditioned release? Is it just raw concentration power that breaks through?
No, it's not about power. It's about precision, and that precision is attained through training. The sources use this beautiful archer simile.
The archer simile.
Yes. If an archer trains diligently, day in and day out, practicing constantly, when the target finally appears, they don't have to strain or doubt or hesitate. The shot is instantaneous, it's flawless, it's effortless.
So the stillness of the 4th jhana is the mental stance of the archer.
It is the fully stable stance. Because the mind has been trained to achieve total unification, and it's been inoculated against attachment by those 11 contemplations, when the final insight hits, the truth of the unconditioned, the mind instantly inclines toward Nibbāna. It's not about straining to achieve cessation. It's about training the mind to be so unified and calm that when the moment of truth arrives, the realization is immediate and irreversible. The training guarantees the release because the mind has already shed all of its gross and subtle attachments.
So the jhanas stabilize the mind so that wisdom, paññā, can perform its ultimate function without any interference.
That's the relationship.
And this brings us to the final, most subtle psychological terrain imaginable. Section 4, climbing the formless peaks, the arupa jhanas 5 through 9. If the form jhanas stripped away our physical and emotional body, what aspects of identity do these formless states tackle?
They go after the final, most abstract components of existence itself. Our concepts of space, consciousness, and even perception itself. These are the last possible conditioned experiences, where the sense of identity retreats into pure, rarefied abstraction.
We begin with āsavakkhaya, the sphere of infinite space, which is the fifth jhana. How is this experience even achieved?
The meditator takes the purified stillness of the fourth jhana as their base, and from there they consciously turn away from the object of concentration, which was a form object, like the breath. They shift their attention to the boundaryless infinite space that is perceived as being around or instead of the body. The formula is sabbaso rupasayana samatikama.
The complete abandonment of all form perception.
All of it. The physical identity dies here. The mind no longer locates itself inside a contained form. Only this boundless openness, ananta akasa, remains.
So the very sense of location is broken.
It's broken, but the mind still perceives that infinite space as an object. When the meditator realizes that even infinite space is conditioned and therefore subject to the 11 contemplations, they then focus on the act of knowing that space.
And that leads us directly to viññāñatana, the sphere of infinite consciousness, the sixth jhana. So the object is replaced by objectless knowing itself.
Yes. The mind shifts from dwelling in the infinite object, which was space, to dwelling in the infinite subject, which is consciousness. The perception becomes, I am aware, boundlessly, universally. And this is probably the subtlest and most dangerous state on the entire path.
Dangerous because of the huge potential for misidentification.
Exactly. This is where awareness collapses into pure, unified cognizing. In many other spiritual traditions, this state is mistaken for the permanent divine self, Atman or Brahman. The meditator feels this overwhelming sense of timeless, boundless existence. It feels like the ultimate truth.
But the Buddhist counter-insight, which is derived from that rigorous application of the 11 contemplations, means the meditator has to see even this boundless awareness as still conditioned. It arose dependent on the abandonment of J5, and therefore it must be anicca impermanent, dukkha unsatisfactory, and anatta not self.
That insight is the razor's edge. It's what distinguishes the liberating path from a path to an eternal but still very subtle rebirth. If that insight holds, the meditator then moves to negate even this vast consciousness, and that's how they enter akiniccaññatana, the sphere of nothingness, J7.
Natikinichi, there's nothing. Even the sense of being boundlessly aware is seen as too much, as too concrete. How does one even enter a state of nothingness?
They dwell on the accents of the previous object. They actively negate the perception of infinite consciousness. So the mind dwells in negation itself. There's no world, no witness, no object. It is an experience of radical, profound absence.
That sounds, frankly, terrifyingly empty. Yet the sources suggest this is a key stepping stone toward liberation.
It is, because the craving for existence, Pāvatana, has almost nowhere left to latch onto. When all form is abandoned and all consciousness is negated, the attachment to just being becomes incredibly tenuous. Attaining J7 or J8 often leads directly to non-returning status because the identification with any form of existence is just so weak.
So we are at the absolute limit of conceptual existence now. The eighth jhana, navasañña-nasaññatana, the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception.
This is the mind in its most subtle, its most attenuated state. The sources describe perception, Sanya, as being so weak that it's incapable of performing its normal function of recognizing or registering an object. But it's not entirely absent. If it were entirely absent, it would be cessation.
So the mind is too subtle to recognize itself, or anything else for that matter. Only a residual, barely functioning vibration of being remains. This is the last stop on the train of conditioned experience.
It is the absolute closest the conditioned mind can get to the unconditioned without actually entering it. Is the final limit of existence. And that sets the stage for the ninth and final stage.
Right.
Sanyavadayita Nirodha, the cessation of perception and feeling.
What exactly happens in cessation in J9?
It is the complete shutdown of the functioning mind. All perception, all feeling, and crucially, all consciousness, viññā, completely stops. The difference between this and, say, a deep coma or unconsciousness is profound. The body remains warm, the life faculties like breath and metabolism continue, but the mind is utterly, totally stopped.
So if consciousness stops, then Nibbāna remains, but it remains unexperienced.
Exactly. There is no consciousness present to experience it. But the state is Nibbāna, because the mind has successfully executed the stilling of all formations. And the outcome is the definitive and permanent realization of arahant status upon emergence from that state, because the training has finally fully eradicated all of the taints.
What an absolutely astonishing map. We have tracked a journey that requires, first, intense moral purity and withdrawal, followed by this surgical psychological analysis, and then a systematic abandonment of every single layer of identity. The senses, the thinking process, the emotions, the body, the sense of space, the sense of being aware, and finally, the sense of existence itself.
We can even summarize the systematic collapse of identity that the sources imply at each stage. In J1, you break the grip of sense desire.
Right.
In J2, you break the need for thinking, for mental formations. In J3, you break the attachment to emotional thrill, to pīti.
The excitement.
The excitement. In J4, you break the attachment to all hedonic polarity, pleasure, and pain. Then in J5, you break the identification with the physical body and with location itself.
You're no longer in a place.
Exactly. In J6, you break the attachment to the witness consciousness as some kind of abiding entity. In J7, you break the craving for gross existence by dwelling in absence. And in J8, you break the attachment to perception itself, leaving only that residual vibration. And then J9 is total cessation.
And the essential countermeasure throughout that entire journey is those 11 contemplations, seeing everything, even the highest, most refined consciousness, as a dart, a tumor, and an alien phenomenon. Without that insight, the jhanas are just a path to the subtlest forms of samsara.
Without that, the mind, having achieved such incredible stability, would simply fall prey to the most insidious of the taints, the craving for existence, bhava-asava. The jhanas provide the stability, the 11 contemplations provide the liberation.
This entire canonical map shows us something truly profound then. Final liberation is not found in the highest state of consciousness, but by systematically stepping beyond it.
Which leads us directly to our final provocative thought for you to consider. The path is all about wisdom, going as deep as perception can possibly go. And for this, we have to quote the Buddha's final summary on this ultimate journey.
As deep as perception goes, wisdom can go.
The implication for the path is crystal clear. Wisdom, anya, or knowledge can penetrate and understand the entire range of conditioned experience, reaching all the way to the edge defined by the 8th jhāna, the absolute peak of subtle perception. But Nibbāna, the deathless element, the etasantayatapite, is found beyond that limit. The ultimate goal of this entire map is not the profound experience of the highest consciousness, but the realization that true final freedom lies in the cessation of all experience, of all formation, and of all perception itself. That is the depth of the insight this map requires.